You saw something beautiful, so you raised your camera and you took the shot. But as soon as you look at the back of your camera, you realize that it just wasn't what you saw with your own eyes. Everything looked flat where there was depth, and everything looked dull that was magical to your eye. So if this gap between what you see and what you get sounds painfully familiar, this video is for you. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly why this gap exists and the 3 specific things that close it fastest, and no gear upgrades required. If you're new here, I'm Karen. I taught myself photography and I built a 13-year portrait business. And I'm here to help you stop spinning your wheels and actually help you get the shots that you've been chasing. But before we get started, if light is the biggest gap between what you see and what you get, the lighting solution is linked below. It includes 5 real lighting setups in hands-on video walkthroughs, so you can see exactly what the light is doing and why. Go check it out. When we have a disconnect between what we're seeing and what we're getting in our camera, we need to first understand that our camera sees things differently than how our eyes see things. Our eyes are constantly adjusting to brightness and shadows and color, and it does this in real time, automatically. But your camera captures one single moment with 1 exposure and 0 adjustments. And that gap is why gorgeous light can look really flat in photos, because your brain experienced it, but your camera just recorded it. This isn't a gear problem. It's a perception problem. And once you understand it, you can start closing that gap intentionally. So before we get into fixes, drop me a comment right now with 1 word. How do your photos usually make you feel when you look at them after a shoot? Go ahead, I'll wait. Here's problem number 1 of why there's a gap between what you see and what you get. There's an undefined vision problem. And what I mean is, most people react and shoot so quickly that they're not thinking about what they want to shoot beforehand. They point their camera at something and they feel a vague feeling about what they're capturing. Then they just press the shutter and they hope that it's going to turn out the way that they saw it. But the problem is, this is like losing at a game where nobody told you what the rules were. So of course the results are going to be disappointing. So the fix to this is really simple. Before you aim your camera and take your shot, ask yourself this 1 question. What do you want your photo to do? Not just capture, but do. Do you want it to feel warm and intimate? Do you want it to look dramatic and moody? Or are you just going for a clean and simple look? Even a rough answer here gives you a direction to move in as you're trying to set up your shot and what you want to capture. Even taking 30 seconds to set your intentions before you take the shot dramatically changes your outcome. I used to do this a lot when I was starting out. I would be at a photo shoot, I might be posing my clients or just putting them in a spot where I thought it would be okay. But had I really slowed down, I would have looked at things a little bit differently. Maybe I would have adjusted somebody's clothing a little bit, or helped them with their posing a little bit more, or their expression, or maybe I would have just turned them a little bit more in a different way towards the light. And just taking that extra time instead of rushing through it and feeling like I needed to get finished would have made a huge difference, because I would always say, well, don't worry about it, I'll just fix it in Photoshop afterwards. But the problem was, I ended up fixing all of my stuff in Photoshop afterwards instead of getting it right in camera the first time. And some things just can't be fixed very well in Photoshop as easily as taking it correctly in your camera to begin with. The next issue causing this disconnect is exposure. Your camera may be set to a metering mode where it's trying to evenly light everything and make it middle toned in your image. And this is great sometimes, but sometimes this is completely wrong for your scene. A classic example of this is if you have a subject in front of something bright like a window, and your camera is trying to meter for the background, and it makes your subject's face turn really dark. And the camera isn't broken, it's just doing what it was told to do by the metering mode that was selected. So the simple fix to this is deciding what you want to have exposed properly, and then adjust from there. You have an exposure compensation dial on your camera, so use it. This is a great example of when this would come in really handy. So take a test shot, check it out, adjust 1 setting, and go from there. And repeat the process as many times as you need until your subject and the background are exposed the way that you want them to be. Have you ever experienced that moment when you've had a subject in front of a bright background and it made your subject really dark? Tell me in the comments. Was it indoors or outdoors or natural light that caused this for you? The third reason that there's a disconnect between what you see and what you get is when the light is doing something intentional versus just existing in your photo. You can have your subject standing in beautiful golden light and everything is lit perfectly. But when you check the back of your camera, you see that the light was just okay and it wasn't as amazing as what you saw. And this is because even lighting is almost always boring lighting. So what makes light look incredible in a photo is having contrast, where there's directional light on your subject and lighting that creates depth and dimension dimensions to your subject's features and the area around them. If you've ever seen a photo that made you stop scrolling, it's often because the light in that photo is doing something intentional, coming from a specific direction, creating shadows, and making that subject pop. You don't need better gear, you need better light placement, or just wait for light that's actually directional. In my early days, I would follow a lot of photographers who'd been at this for a while, and when I'd see a portrait of somebody that looked just absolutely beautiful, I always thought it was just naturally that way, and somehow the photographer just got lucky. But I never really realized that they have so much that goes into their photos, such as putting a subject in a scene, metering specifically for the background, and perhaps having some sort of off-camera lighting just out of the frame that's lighting the subject's face appropriately to kind of fill in those shadows. And then on top of that, there was often specific types of editing that would create an even more polished look to that photo. So if you ever see a photo that just looks too good to be true, there's often much more to that photo than we can see. And depending on what direction the lighting is coming from, it can create far different looks. For example, if you have a light coming directly from the front and evenly lighting your subject versus having side lighting or even backlighting. A bonus element that I want to add is something I just touched on, and that's editing. For years, my instinct was just to fix everything in editing that I couldn't get right in my camera. I would crank up the contrast and the saturation, hoping that something would make it look better than what I captured. But editing only looks good when your photo is already solid from the beginning. If the photo is sharp where it's supposed to be sharp, and if it was actually shot in good light. So once I started getting my photos correct in camera, my editing workflow became a lot easier and a lot quicker. I would send my images through a consistent workflow that just involved correcting the white balance across the entire session for consistency, just making any minor adjustments that were needed. Then I would make minor changes to any exposure that might not be quite where I wanted it to be. Next, I would crop and straighten my images, and I would end my workflow with a little bit of light sharpening if it needed it. But that was it. I wanted a clean and honest image to look like it looked in real life to me, or making it look slightly better, but not dramatically different. So to wrap up, your camera isn't failing you when there's a gap between what you see and what you get. It's just seeing things differently than you are, and it's almost never a gear problem. It's an intention problem, a light problem, and sometimes an exposure problem. If you fix those things before you press the shutter, then editing becomes so much easier. I genuinely want you to get this, not just understand it intellectually, but actually start seeing things differently when you're behind your camera. That's what this is all about. The lighting solution is linked below, 5 lighting setups and hands-on video walkthroughs so you can see exactly what the light is doing and make it work for your vision instead of against it. So go get the shot you actually saw. And if you made it this far, drop me a comment and tell me, what brand of camera are you shooting with? I'm always curious what's out in the wild. Okay, I'll see you next time.